Hi everybody, welcome back, or if you're new here, I'm Destiny, and today I'm going to be talking about my January recap. I know it's a little late, and I know I said I wasn't sure if I was going to be doing regular recaps and TBRs and stuff on this channel after coming back, but the more I thought about it, I feel like it's just such a good snapshot of what I've been reading lately, and it seemed like the easiest way to kind of catch you all up on what I've been reading in 2025, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I know it's late. I know as I'm filming this, it's February 27th, but it is what it is. Hopefully I'll get February's up pretty soon and that'll have my March TBR in it. But anyway, let's dive right in. I actually didn't think I would read so much in January because at the end of 2024, I was pretty far from my Goodreads goal and I read like a ton of really short stuff to try to catch up really fast and I got a little burnout. So I actually slumped a lot in January. I think I went like 8 days without finishing a book, which is not terrible, obviously, but it's a little abnormal for me. I did still end up reading 8 books, and then I also DNF'd 2. So first I read How to Flirt with a Hellhound by Shannon May. I don't remember how I found this. I just remember finding out about it and seeing that it was on Kindle Unlimited, and I immediately checked it out and ended up reading it all that night, I think. I want to say it was an ad on Facebook, which I usually don't pay any attention to those, but something about it had caught my eye, and I ended up loving it, so I'm glad it did. It's a paranormal rom-com about this writer who falls for his new neighbor, who is a hellhound, and in this world, the hellhounds are these presumably normal guys who can smell or sense evil, and they hunt down bad guys. Well, the writer is being stalked by one of his fans, and the hellhound decides to jump in and protect him, and things kind of go from there. It's just a really cute book. The stalking part is obviously there, but if that doesn't bother you, the rest of the book is really cute. And my favorite part is how ridiculous the main character is, because you know how people who hate romance books love to say stuff like, oh, if you read that stuff, it'll normalize like stalking and all this. So basically the main character in this book is, if those things happened, he's like completely self-unaware, and at one point he's like, wow, my hot neighbor has no boundaries and is probably a serial killer. I'm down for that. It's just great. Anyway, I'd especially recommend it for anyone who likes the Unnecessary Evils series by Only James. I have read Unhinged, the first book in that series, and the entire time I was reading How to Flirt with a Hellhound, something about it kind of reminded me of that. It's also the first book in a series, and the hellhounds are these kind of brothers and everything, so it has some similarities, but it reminded me of Unhinged, just a lot sillier. My next read was This Cursed House by Del Sandine, and I'm sorry to say I actually DNF'd this one. It's a historical horror novel set in the 60s about a Black woman who leaves her life in Chicago to start over new in New Orleans, taking on a job as a teacher for this rich family, the Duchons. Of course, when she gets there, the family's really weird and nothing is what she was told it would be. And she gets sucked into this generational curse setup. It had a really cool premise, but the problem is that the main character is so complacent. She has no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. She was completely fine to let all of these bizarre things happen around and to her. And I read this with a group of people, and we were pretty much unanimous. Most of us felt the same way, that we just kind of felt like this main character was not reacting in a realistic way. Like, she was just very meh about everything, and she didn't seem interested in taking any kind of control or having any sort of agency, and the writing was just not there for me. So unfortunately, I did DNF this. That said, if the things that bothered me are not things that normally bother you, then this would be one that I would recommend if you like gothic historical horror, because it did have a really cool premise. I will definitely be interested in trying the author's next book. After that, I finished 7 Rabbits by Timothy King, which was actually a buddy read with my friend Misty that I had been working on since sometime in December, I want to say. And it's about a group of teenage boys who are on a football team together, and they go away for a weekend at a cabin. The only thing is that these kids are absolutely horrible little shits and they've done all of this terrible stuff, and basically they get what's coming to them while they're at the cabin. I won't spoil anything. All I will say is that I love a good revenge story. I love a good revenge story. And something that was really cool about the book is that it actually alternated chapters. So like one chapter would be about the teenage boys in the cabin and what was happening with them. And then the next chapter would actually go back and kind of cover what they had done to a victim and what the victim was experiencing and stuff like that. I just thought Timothy King's storytelling was fantastic, and the book deals with some pretty heavy topics, but it was all handled so respectfully. You could tell that the author really put a lot of care into writing the story, but also there's some really fun, creative gore and some really interesting kills. So it was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. I would say Seven Rabbits was easily my favorite extreme horror book I had read in quite a while. Next, I finally read Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, which I feel like everyone has been raving about, and I enjoy Nat Cassidy's writing overall. I haven't quite read any of his novels yet, but I've read some short stories and I've enjoyed them, and I just enjoy him as a person. He seems lovely. So I was excited to pick it up. It's about a guy who gets trapped in a gas station bathroom overnight with a killer on the loose, and it's pretty messed up. It's very claustrophobic. Kind of weird, kind of grody. There's definitely some bizarre stuff happening. But it was fun. It was really, really fun. I already don't like gas station bathrooms, so this added a whole other level to that anxiety, so that's great. Thanks, Nat Cassidy. Then I read The Christmas Tree Farm by Laurie Gilmore. That's the third book in the Dream Harbor series, which starts with the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. I'm sure everybody's seen the series around if you haven't read it. They're just fluffy, cute romance books, and I really enjoyed them. I really love the way Laurie Gilmore writes characters. In each book in the series so far, there's been at least one character that I just really, really resonated with me. So The Christmas Tree Farm follows Kira, this new woman in town who has bought the old Christmas tree farm, and Bennett, who is the brother of the main character from the first series, and he's come to visit. He comes out to the Christmas tree farm for something, and he ends up finding all the stuff that needs to be fixed around the property and in the house, and he's kind of a fixer-upper sort, and so he gets really sucked into wanting to help Kira fix everything. And he has this mentality where he really needs to make himself feel useful because that's how he convinces himself that people value him. And I'm not going to open that can of worms right now. I'm just going to say that that hit really close to home a lot of times during the book. And it was really beautifully written. I loved the representation of how he views himself and how he learns to grow throughout the book. Also, it's fun because it's a grumpy sunshine romance, but she's the grumpy one. And I don't think we see that a lot in straight romances. I don't think we get to see the woman be the grumpy one very often. And I really liked it, especially because she's super grumpy towards people, but she's obsessed with animals. And Bennett has these 3 dogs that he takes everywhere with him, and she's in love with his dogs. And so there's this whole sort of subplot where every time his dogs show up, she just freaks out, and she's like thinking about how animals are better than people and how she feels so much closer to them and so much more accepted by them. And of course I related a lot to that as an animal lover. So this book made me need to go hug my dog a lot, but in a good way, nothing sad. And it was just really fun, good read. Next was another DNF. And I feel like some people are going to be upset about this because I know everybody and their mom loves this book, but it was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I don't even have to go into it. Everybody knows about this book. It's a romance between a figure skater and a hockey player. And I don't know what it was. I hated the characters from literally the first chapter. I hated every single character. I hated the main character. I hated the love interest. I hated her boyfriend. I hated everybody. And life is short, and I don't have time to read books about characters that I don't like, so I DNF'd it pretty early on. I would love to say that maybe I'll try it again someday because it is so hyped, but I probably won't. Then I had another like random Kindle Unlimited find that I picked up completely on a whim and just kind of sped through. and that was Grave Intentions. It's by Selena Winters, and it is a taboo dark romance about two foster siblings who grow up in an abusive household together, and then as they get older, they end up falling in love with each other. And it was fine. Like, I don't really have much to say about it. It was a really quick read. It was very engaging, but I had a lot of issues with the writing. The pairing was not really for me. There was not a lot of chemistry. There really wasn't much of anything to go off of between them other than him protecting her when they were kids because he was the older foster kid. And it kind of just felt like, other than that, there wasn't really much reason for them to be together. They weren't a couple that I could really imagine rooting for. You know what I mean? If you like taboo dark romances, it might be a good quick read for you. I will say definitely check the content warnings if that's something that you need, because the abuse depiction is pretty graphic and it's pretty chronic. It goes through most of the book. Every time you think that there's not going to be any more abuse, it kind of pops back up. It's never between the main character and the love interest, though. It's only between the characters and the foster parents. So there is that. And then next was a book from one of my favorite authors, Christina Henry. I finally read Horseman, which was her Sleepy Hollow retelling, and I liked it a lot. It wasn't a new favorite of hers for me, but I did enjoy it. My favorite thing was actually the trans rep with the main character, which, you know, like, full disclaimer, I'm cis. I can't speak to the authenticity of the trans representation or how trans people are going to feel about it. You know, I haven't seen anybody complain about it, so I hope that means that it's done well. It felt respectful to me and I really enjoyed it. But the whole retelling is just such a unique twist on Sleepy Hollow. Like, if you enjoy Sleepy Hollow retellings, I would say that this is one you definitely need to check out, because I've never seen a Sleepy Hollow retelling take the angles that Christina Henry did in this book. Basically, the premise is that it's Sleepy Hollow, but if Ichabod Crane had run off and left, and Katrina had gotten with Brom instead. And it's now like 40 or 50 years later, and our main character is Brom's grandchild with Katrina. And so kids have started going missing, and the townsfolk think that the Headless Horseman has done it. And it's just really, really interesting to see somebody take such a classic tale that we tend to typically see kind of go about the same general storyline a lot, or at least most of the retellings that I have seen follow the same general storyline, and then for Christina Henry to just breathe such a fresh breath of air into it and to really change things up. I thought it was really cool. I really, really liked the twist a lot. So if you like Sleepy Hollow retellings and you haven't picked up Horseman yet, I definitely think you should. Then I read Summer of the Monsters by David Sodergren, and I gotta take a second here to tell y'all, I am obsessed with this man's books right now. I think I've read five-ish of his books over the last few months, either 4 or 5. And I've given every single one 5 stars with no hesitation, like no 4.5 stars. They're all solid 5s. They've all been wonderful. I have been just so impressed, and I've fallen so in love with his writing, and I'm upset at myself for not picking up his books sooner, especially because people have recommended them to me over the years and I haven't picked them up yet. And now here I am, and I'm like, you were all right. I owe you all an apology for not picking up his book sooner, because I'm obsessed. They all take place in Scotland, or at least to my knowledge, they all do. He's a Scottish author, and I love that setting. It's really fun. I will admit, you know, on a kind of silly level, that part of it's fun because I found out a couple of years ago that I am heavily Scottish, and that my dad's side of the family is very, very heavily comprised of Scottish origin. So it's kind of cool, you know, like, I don't know, it's fun. It's not a culture that I could necessarily connect to, but it's still fun to learn more about, you know, the areas and stuff, because so much of it is inspired by David's own experiences and places that he's lived and places that he's visited and stuff. But anyway, Summer of the Monsters is set in the 90s mostly. It begins in modern day and then it goes back. It's about her memories. And it's about this main character who, when she was 16, spent a summer in a small town with her dad. And this small town has these monster legends. And she ends up actually befriending one of the monsters. It is a horror book, but it also has so much heart, because a lot of the book is about this monster that she befriended. His name is Samo. That's what she names him. And he's described as looking like a giant capybara. And if you're not like rushing to buy the book yet, what are you doing with your life? Because how do you not love a giant capybara monster that befriends the main character? Like, I would go to war for Sammo. I would go to war for Sammo. I love him. And it was just wonderful. It was so good. It had such gorgeous writing, and it was so nostalgic because it's all set in the 90s, and I know it takes place in Scotland, so obviously it's a different part of the world, but I grew up in the 90s and there was still so much about it that I recognized, so many fun little references, and there's a lot of nostalgia. It's definitely very much a love letter to anyone who grew up in like the 90s, whether you were a kid or a teenager. So I really enjoyed it, and I think at this point I should probably just like rename this video, and instead of a January recap, maybe I just need to call it like the David Sodergren Love Fest, because I'm just like, I'm gushing, I know, but I've really enjoyed his books lately, and I just really want people to check his books out. He writes like crazy. The man is a machine, and I think all of his books are on Kindle Unlimited. If not, I know most of them are. I know like a ton of them are. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, that would be a great place to check them out. He's also got audiobooks of some of them. I actually just bought the audiobook of The Horror a few days ago just because I want to reread it. Like, I've already read it, and then I still went and bought the audiobook of it because I was like, I just read it a few months ago and I already need to read it again. It was so good. So yeah, definitely very strongly recommend his books. I also learned recently that he writes under two names, and the funny thing is that I had read one of the books by his other name, which is Carl John Lee. I had read, it's called Horror House of Perversion. I had read that and I loved it, and I did not make the connection that it was him, and then I found out it was him, so that was very exciting. So those are more extreme than his David Sodergren books, so do with that what you will. If you want to start out with a more extreme book, pick up one of the Carl John Lee books, and if you want a less extreme, then I would go with one of the David Sodergren books. I think Summer of the Monsters would be a good one to start with. I also think that The Horror or Maggie's Grave would be excellent starting places. Okay, and then last but not least, I loved Seven Rabbits by Timothy King so much that at the end of January, I actually picked up another one of his books. It's a short story collection of horror short stories about evil kids, and it's called Fuck Them Kids. And I'm sorry, but that is one of the greatest horror book titles I've ever heard in my life. I'm obsessed. So if that offends you, well, first of all, if that offends you, we probably aren't compatible anyway. You probably don't even want to be like watching my videos, because I'm not sure that we're on the same wavelength here when it comes to senses of humor. But I loved it. It was amazing. Every story was really fun, and the kids in these stories are so horrible that like you don't even really feel bad for cheering when they get what they deserve, which I know sounds terrible. Like, I'm a mom, I have an 8-year-old, but he's a good kid, and like he would never be in one of these stories, so that's what matters. But it was so fun. And you know when you're reading a book and it has a very specific title, and then at some point in the book the author will reference the title and you're like, oh, they did the thing. You know what I'm talking about? This book has my favorite example of that ever, because when the title of the book comes into play in one of the stories, I was in public, okay? I think I was sitting in like a doctor's office waiting room. Maybe I was at the dentist. I don't remember where I was. I just remember that I was in public when I read it, and I had to like stop myself in mid-laugh because I like literally busted out laughing, and I was so embarrassed because people looked at me, and like what was I gonna do? Was I going to like, oh, like I'm reading a horror book called Fuck Them Kids about all these evil kids getting like getting justice served? You can't tell strangers that. That's not the kind of thing you can tell strangers. Like, so, but it was so good. It was so much fun. So definitely recommend it. Okay, and that's it. That's everything that I read in January. So like I said, 8 books plus 2 DNFs. So I was pretty happy with that, especially with how slumpy I felt for a lot of January. And if you're still watching this, thank you so much for watching, because again, I know this video is like hella late. January ended 4 weeks ago and here we are, but anyway, hopefully I'll get the February recap up pretty quickly. Like I said, it's February 27th as I'm recording this, so hopefully I can film the February recap this weekend maybe and get it posted pretty soon. And I'll have my March TBR on that because I'm really excited about some of the books that I'm picking up in March. But yeah, thank you again for watching. I hope you had fun. I had fun. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know if you enjoyed them. Let me know how you feel about horror authors using vaguely offensive phrases in their book titles. No, look, I'm not over exaggerating, okay? Because when I tell you there's actually an author's note where Timothy King says he almost didn't name the book that because he was worried nobody would read it. And I'm like, okay, but I'm so glad he did because I'm the kind of person who, when I saw the title, I immediately clicked on it and I was like, I need that. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up now. Thanks again for watching. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I hope you have a good weekend and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.